Welcome to Great Shot. This is the Great Shot Podcast, a Cracked Rackets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. On tonight's show, we've got another live edition of The Deciding Point, our weekly breakdown of everything that's happening across the Division I college tennis world. Of course, here on Tuesday nights, we break down the Division I women's action, and let me just say once again, it is so great to be back live on YouTube recording these episodes. To all of you in the chat joining us from the broader college tennis universe, we welcome you back in, and as always, I want to remind you, we welcome your feedback throughout the show. If there is a comment you agree with, disagree with, always feel free to let us know why. If there are any follow-up questions we can answer throughout the course of the show, that is why we wanted to do these live, to have that opportunity to engage with those of you in the college tennis universe. So as always, welcome back into the show. Hopefully you will all be willing to share your thoughts with us tonight as we progress through what was, dare I say, a perception-changing Week 12 of this Division I women's college tennis season. I thought last week's results, all due respect to Week 11, they were a little bit stale. Week 12, it delivered. We had upsets of, dare I say, the highest magnitude, and just, again, a bunch of perception perhaps changing results for us to take note of. Of course, there was so much that happened out in the state of California. That's where we'll start. We'll get to all the ACC action, some SEC madness, some teams who continue to consolidate their position as NCAA tournament bound, and so much more. And of course, joining me to help break all of that down, look at the current rankings, look at the week ahead, and so much more, is the man who joins me each and every week on this show. Of course, you all know him best as the returning champion of returning champions on our Cracked Rackets podcast, founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog and podcast, our on-the-ground correspondent for so much happening throughout the course of this 2024 season, and of course, it's my dear friend, John J. Parsons, joining us once again. Jay, hey. Great shot. Welcome back to the show. Week 12 in the books. Are you recovered from all the tennis? Are you recovered from your women's college basketball foray, my friend? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I tried to double dip this weekend, both with the tennis and spent some time in Portland for the Elite Eight, the women's college basketball. And, you and I both put out content into the ether, and it's always helpful to hear feedback from the people. Sometimes you don't get any. When I tell you, I got so much feedback about my two tweets I made about being in attendance at women's college basketball Elite Eight. Like it would be a surprise that someone who has attended every NCAA tennis tournament since 2010 would happen to go to the NCAA college basketball tournament. So much feedback. You should start J Tweets basketball. You should like, what is this? I didn't know you were such a big fan of basketball. It was overwhelming the feedback I got, but it was a fantastic weekend. I got to see tennis and basketball.
Well, that's the best of both worlds, and certainly I'm glad you got to enjoy yourself. I mean, we all saw the number was, 12 million people tuned in last night to Iowa, LSU, myself, Westhoff included. I was talking to my dad about how I was excited for that game, and I was like, trust me, women's basketball thriving is great for college tennis. It just is, because it proves there are more revenue pathways through college athletics than perhaps previously imagined, and yeah, I mean, more than anything, it was really good basketball. You know, it's fun to watch someone score 40 points. You know, it's fun to watch someone rack up 20 rebounds. You know, it's even more fun to watch the fact that I think I love Paige Beckers more than maybe any athlete out there in the world right now. Ask Westhoff. I've been a Beckers guy from the start. She's two torn ACLs not happening away from being the college basketball GOAT. Anyways, we'll save the women's college basketball talk for J Tweets basketball. I suppose when you watch the I don't know, no threes, no problem, whatever it may be, the equivalent there. For now, obviously, we want to focus on all the action that happened in Week 12, and look, as always, there are so many different places we could start. We are in the thick of conference play. We had a bunch of different senior days over the course of the weekend. It's way too early to start senior day season. I mean, we just turned the calendar to April. I almost shed a tear or two thinking about, again, some of the programs who were competing at home for the final time, Manny Diaz's Georgia Bulldogs included. But obviously for us, the place we're going to start is a place near and dear to your heart, Jay. That is, of course, on the West Coast, where there was just all sorts of madness, all sorts of chaos in the state of California. We had, in the purest sense, a splitting of the results in what was a really fun four-match sequence in Northern California. Of course, Stanford, Cal hosting USC, UCLA, respectively. It's a logic game, Jay. If Stanford beats USC, but USC beats Cal, but Cal beats UCLA, but UCLA beats Stanford, who's the best team of the group? John J. Parsons, who was the biggest winner of this quad out in Northern California. Again, everyone goes 1-1. We'll get into the meat and potatoes of it all here in a moment. But in your mind, Jay, where do we start as we look at this pure splitting of these four matches?
Well, I think in terms of the biggest winner, I think you have to start with UCLA. And the reason being is that coming into the weekend, UCLA was on the outside looking in of the top 16. They were the lowest ranked team of these four teams. And so for them to go and get a road win over a number 5 ranked Stanford, that's massive points for UCLA. And you look at Cal and USC. USC is sitting there still with their Michigan win, so they feel pretty good. Cal has started to rack up a handful of good wins, maybe no top 5 wins like a USC and now a UCLA have, but of the weekend, I would say you have to point to UCLA as being the biggest winner.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way they won each of their matches as well, right? The fact that they dropped doubles point against Cal, and yet, again, we're right there at the end of that match, and I think it came down to the number 3 singles position, if memory serves me correct, with Wiersholm ultimately pulling things out at 3J. But, again, it's that they found 3 singles victories against Cal. It's the fact that you look at what they were able to do in their Stanford match, the fact that they were able to take doubles on the road at Stanford, get that 7-6 win at the number 2 spot from Hans and Lukemeyer, and, moving Kimmy Hans down to the number 2 spot. I'm sure that took some adjusting because she's typically been at number 1. Her and Elisa Wagle have been an exceptional team for the past year and a half, and yet that move pays dividends. And then, again, things to build off of. In both matches, Tien wins over Angelica Blake and a win over, is it Ivanov, I think, is playing one now.
Yeah,
for Cal, and, for Kimmy Hans to get 2 wins as well, to beat Akani Ma, who almost looks like her freshman self again, like has been that good throughout the course of this dual match season at the number 2 spot, for her to get a win over Cal as well. And we'll get into the machinations of the Cal lineup in a moment, because El Sol at 4. I mean, that was like a moment for me when I saw that. I was like, wait, what's been going on with Cal? And, they've only had 11 matches, so I guess a lot changed between 10 and 11. But, again, for Hans to get a win over Viller Moeller as well, and like those are 2 really good wins for UCLA, and they were pretty competitive everywhere else as well, Jay, for a team that it felt like we didn't know a lot about because, again, coming out of this weekend, I think they've now played 15 total matches, and it's April 2nd. This team is top 16 good, and we'll talk about the rankings obviously a little bit later, but I think they've shown, and big picture, they now have a win over A&M. Rankings don't care how they got that win, but they got a win over A&M, right? First weekend of the season, that was them? Or
Texas.
Texas, thank you, not A&M.
Even better for them.
Amen. A win over Texas. They got a win now over Stanford as well, and a win over USC, the points being distributed so well now between the Pac-12 because everyone's beaten everyone. It doesn't matter that they've played 15 matches. Like, they're back in the top 16 hunt. You look at this week's ITA rankings, which of course came out today. They're up to 14, Jay, on 15 matches. I agree. I think they have to be considered the biggest winner of the weekend and obviously there's a reason they made the big ranking jump. It's because they beat freaking Stanford at Stanford. That's just not something you see every season, regardless of if this Stanford team's not where it was half a decade ago relative to the rest of the field. That's still remarkably impressive.
Yeah, and you start to look at this UCLA team and you feel like they're a 2-point team because they are very solid in doubles. They've now split up Kimmy Hansen, Wagley, like you mentioned, but they have 3 solid doubles players. If you're going to return the NCAA singles champion, she's going to be solid anywhere for you in doubles. Van Grantian there now partnering with Wagley. So you feel like they should be able to find a doubles point, and then Van Grantian hasn't lost a match outdoors this season, so she is looking very strong at 1. I would say a few others like And Christine Lüchtemeier has been looking much better this season. She started to look really good down the home stretch of her freshman season last year. She's continued that form there at the number 4 position. A good win, straight set win over Alexis Blokina of Stanford. So they have pieces, and I thought it was a really impressive weekend for them and a much needed win as well.
Absolutely. Who's 2 on your list? I'll fill in that in
Two,
this one because of the Hezzy. I'd go Cal. I think they needed one of the wins this week. And I think, by the way, I think it's between Cal and USC for
yeah,
this
for
number
sure.
2 spot. It can't be, Stanford has to be 4 because they expected to go into the weekend 2-0. I go Cal because, USC kind of already had the Michigan win. And they
Right.
had some things that they would be able to build on, of course, throughout the rest of the season. Cal's 12-4 and surface level. That sounds like a really good number, but what wins do they really have to ride on right now? Yeah, they beat Oklahoma at Oklahoma during kickoff weekend. Certainly that match hasn't aged poorly, but they kind of needed to beat one of those Los Angeles-based teams here in Pac-12 play, and obviously that Stanford match with them will be huge when it happens on the schedule, but I think Cal kind of needed this to see how their lineup has changed. Again, Ivanov at 1, Viller Moeller 2, Wiersholm 3, now El Sola at 4. Whether it's Lan Mi or Mushika, like those are grinders at 5 and 6. They have real depth in this singles lineup, and whoever is 4 in that lineup should do a lot of winning. Now we'll get to Cayetano beating El Sola to clinch in a moment here, but I think this is a big win for Cal to be as competitive. Again, they're right there in the USC match as well. They lose that one 4-3 overall, clinched by Cayetano at 4 to get a win over UCLA as well for a team that hasn't played that much. They're all the way up to what I believe now number 10, firm 10 in the ITA rankings. How's that not a win?
Yeah, I think you're right from a rankings perspective. As I look at their wins, their best win right now is number 15 San Diego team.
Sure.
And that win
Well, no,
historically,
isn't it number 14 now UCLA because they beat them?
sorry, it will be.
Yeah, okay,
Yes,
got it.
in next week. But like as of standing right now, they beat number 15 San
Got
Diego.
it, got it, got it.
So next week, yes, it'll get updated. But right now, San Diego, and that win will probably regress.
Mm-hmm.
So they needed to pad that ranking a little bit, but they've also not lost to anyone, really. They've lost to Pepperdine twice, Michigan, and USC. So all top 10 losses for them. I probably would have gone USC though, because and I'm biased in this, in that I saw the Stanford USC match. And so for USC to turn around and get that win over Cal in another 4-3 fashion, I thought was really impressive for them to bounce back after a disappointing loss to Stanford, and where I didn't think they played their best tennis. So for me, yes, Cal probably needed that win more, but I was probably more impressed by the bounce back with USC.
I think that's very fair. I also think for USC to get that win on the road, I mean, in a year where road wins have been so hard to come by, that's super impressive for the Trojans, who now, again, they have a win over number 10 Cal, they have a win over number 2 Michigan. They're feeling pretty good about their top 16 chances in Los Angeles, and they still get UCLA at home, I believe, again here this season. So they still have that on the board as well as an opportunity for gain. Obviously, a UCLA team that will come in even more highly ranked than anticipated after that Stanford win. It's how they beat Cal as well. I mean, for what I think it was at 2 and 3, they got victories in that match. Yeah, Charney straight sets over Viller Moeller, Piper straight sets over Wiersholm, and then obviously for Cayetano to clinch there as well. It's been a huge season for Erin Cayetano, and obviously she's playing far lower in the lineup than she has been for the last 2-3 years for the Trojans. But at least she's responded. Like, at least she has been that good in that lower half of the lineup. And I certainly think Charney, Hahn are playing well enough to justify being above her. To see Piper get this big win over Wiersholm as well. She's played good ball this season. I continue to say they're very frisky in doubles. You're right. USC probably more impressive, but I do stick by Cal needed it more. And so that's why they would have been at my number 2 spot. What about the Stanford of it all? 1-1 overall. Now they had the most comfortable win, right? They got the 4-1 over
Yeah, the only
USC.
4-1.
Yeah. Blokina had a bad weekend. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, that was a sore spot. And yet, Connie Ma was trailing to Kimmy Hans for the entirety of that match. She nearly pulled out the win and allowed Stanford to escape. Oh my God, would that have been Houdini-esque? They lose this match. Like, again, this Stanford team, it's just a reminder that they're not that experienced at being this caliber of like top 5, top 3, inner circle, inner circle. Like, this group hasn't been that for a few years. There are going to be some hiccups along the way, Jay.
Yeah, Connie Ma had 2 match points there
Yeah.
at in the third set at 5-4, and but for her to even push that to a third set was impressive. To come back, get that tiebreak. Look, Stanford put themselves in an early hole going down a doubles point, a very close doubles point, but they have not found the success with Blake and Blakina that they had last season at the number 1 spot. They've tried pushing them down to number 2. They lose there against UCLA. And with the weekend Blakina had, that was going to be a point on the board for UCLA. Bottom of the lineup is looking pretty solid for Stanford. They get the straight set wins at 5 and 6. It's a tough ask for anyone to beat Van Gruntian at the number 1 position. So it comes down to Connie Ma, and tough loss for sure, but that was as close as you get in a college tennis match over 4 hours. So it was a good performance from UCLA, and I think these are the kind of matches that you want this Stanford team to be in if they are going to make it deep in Stillwater, and potentially a hostile environment as well if they have to face the Cowgirls.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, Hui goes 2-0 on the weekend. Shu would have gotten a win over USC, and she did get a win over UCLA. So it does feel like that bottom of the lineup, 5 and 6 singles, now as good as perhaps advertised at the start of the season, and you knew they would be the second we moved outdoors. You know, whomever is playing 1 has struggled a little bit this year for Stanford. Now, 2 and 3, I think, have been really relative to how good 2 and 3 are. Say, by normal standards, of course, standards, you'll take whomever the one for Stanford is. But it does feel
Well,
like,
it's only Ben Blake.
I feel like this week. Oh, did Yepa Fanova? I don't know why in my head I thought Yepa Fanova played 1 this weekend. You're right. I mean, again, she's been good, not elite, good at that number 1 spot. Again, there have been some ups and downs for Blokina. I still think the Stanford team is inner circle good. Like, again, this match told me more about UCLA than it is me knocking Stanford that far from the top. You know, again, I still think it's a fascinating race. Who's the national championship favorite is obviously Oklahoma State. Who do you put at number 2 right now is a fascinating conversation, one we will continue to have as this season progresses. But, again, it was a really fun weekend in California, and at the start of the season, if I would have told you on April 2nd that there were 4 top 16 Pac-12 teams, you would have said, how did that happen? Like, oh, someone made a run at a national indoors, or UCLA and USC. UCLA beats Oklahoma State kickoff weekend. USC gets out of Tennessee. You figured that might have had to happen, plus Washington made some run at the national indoors. No, that's not the case. Like, Stanford's 5, USC 9, Cal 10, UCLA 14. Washington's at 25 as well. Like, the Pac-12 is in a really good place, and they're all going to have opportunities to continue to consolidate their positions moving forward. And so, again, just not where you maybe expected. It's where the West Coast should be traditionally, and you throw Pepperdine, San Diego in the mix. That's 2 other really good West Coast teams. But shout out State of California, back, dare I say, in the college tennis universe. Jay, that's everything that happened out west. Let's now move to the Atlantic coast, where we had 2 fascinating results to break down. I think the place we have to start is with the University of Virginia, who, dare I say, earned one of their first signature victories of the season. Now, let's be clear. Virginia's only lost twice. Both of those losses to number 2 Michigan. But Virginia's done a really good job of beating who they're supposed to beat. I do think they were still looking for that first signature victory, and dare I say they got it this past week on Thursday over NC State. Now, ultimately, the match finishes 5-2, but Jay, Virginia won after dropping the doubles, gets 3 straight set wins in singles in this match, 2, 3, and 6. Like, that is a testament to their singles depth. And I know Shake, Shu have flip-flopped at those 1 and 2 spots. On this day, it was Shu, the straight set win over Ziranova, Ziadato, straight set win over Abrams, and then Collard, the straight set win over Broadfoot. You know, everything after that went 3 sets, and ultimately it was both Subash, Shake, getting 3-set wins. That's how they got to the 5 points. I believe it was Shake who ultimately delivered the clinch. But I mean, again, like, it just speaks to the options this Virginia lineup seems to possess. Even down one love, the depth they have 1 through 6, they can really win everywhere. And I understand no Abigail Rencelli for NC State in this match, given she plays in the top half of the lineup. That certainly matters, but it's another match where NC State takes doubles, Jay, and yet Virginia's depth wins out. They're the last undefeated team. Like, they play UNC this weekend. That match is for the ACC regular season title. We'll preview it a little bit later, but it's a dream start for Coach O'Leary. This is the best Virginia team she's ever had, dare I say, to this point of a season.
Yeah, this was a statement win for sure. They were very close to sweeping all 6 singles matches against NC State. Maybe not the first signature win. They did beat North Carolina, which, given the rivalry, and
but I throw that one out. You all, again, it's just like,
you might, they don't.
No, and they shouldn't. But in my head, it was just like, that wasn't the way this one was. Like, it's not a consolation match. This one's like, hey, regular season ACC title, you beat NC State, it's now in your hands.
Absolutely. And it is very much in their hands. They control their destiny for the ACC regular season title, which would, I believe, be the first in Coach O'Leary's tenure here at Virginia. And so they also have some cushion. We'll get into that. But yeah, it was a comprehensive win, and you feel like they can win at every single one of these positions. And coming into this match, that was going to be in their favor, given the volatility that we've seen from NC State. And then when they take out Rencelli, which not sure if that was injury related or just given her form, and Heba Shake has had a fantastic senior season here at Virginia. I mean, she's up to 22 in the singles rankings. She has now had multiple top 10 victories. She's beaten Savannah Brodus, now Amelia Raetsky. So she's had some fantastic results. And yeah, that's, if she's going to keep playing like that, they're going to have pathways at every single one of these positions against every team.
I mean, they're 17-2 overall, so of course the numbers are going to be gaudy. And I should have mentioned their first round victory, it was indoors, but to beat Pepperdine, who's 3 in the country right now, that's a signature win. So obviously that one was on their resume already coming into this as well. But I mean, Jay, the numbers are laughable. It's like Chervinsky, 14-2, Collard, 15-1, Shake, 11-3, and now has that signature victory over Raetsky. Ziodato, 14-3 as well. It's just like, I mean, again, other than a loss to Michigan, this team doesn't lose to anyone so far this season. 17-0 against everyone else, and now they do have a couple of top 10 victories. They still, obviously, the match against North Carolina this weekend in Chapel Hill. It's a massive moment. It's another opportunity for this program who, yes, did beat UNC at the National Indoors, which is another signature victory they have on their resume. And honestly, a loss to UNC because of that doesn't hurt them in the big picture ranking sense. This team is going to be top 8. They've played their way there. But I think they've played their way into the inner circle as well, Jay. Like, that's, again, to get 3 straight set victories after dropping doubles, that's how the best teams respond to that sort of adversity. And that's what made this win particularly impressive, Jay. It's, again, North Carolina, they won doubles at 6 first sets on that Sunday at the National Indoors. This match, they had to work for it. And for Shake to clinch 7-6 in the third over Raetsky, like, that's as a signature victory comes.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And we talked about the dichotomy of their schedule, top half heavy and then kind of lighter throughout the rest of the season. Now it's picking up. This was the first start of it, and they have some heavy hitters to come in North Carolina. So we'll see how they fare now that they are, you could argue, the favorite in this match against North Carolina. It's not a position this Virginia team has been in. So it'll be very interesting to see how they adapt moving forward into the next few regular season matches, but then also the conference tournament, where at minimum they'll be a top 2 seed.
Yeah, let me give you another fun fact, Jay, coming out of this match, because this was one that certainly I didn't expect, but just a fun fact. You look at the rankings that came out today on the ITA side of things. NC State, 14th in the ITA rankings right now, Jay. I feel like we've asked this question for 4 consecutive weeks because we've had weekends where they lost to Syracuse, beat UNC, and lost to Duke, now lose here to UVA. Have you hit the panic button? Like, where are you with this NC State team?
No, my philosophy stays the same. Like, I had no expectations that NC State would come in and be an inner circle title contender this year with the amount of freshmen that they have, losing Dana Schneider and Alana Smith. So there's no panic button, but they have no top 20 wins outside of North Carolina. That is their only top 20 win. So you're going to have to do more than beat North Carolina to win an NCAA title. So no. And they have losses to 47 Syracuse, 22 Oklahoma, 19 Duke. So no, there's no panic button because I don't know what we're panicking about. They're doing their best.
It's just interesting. Like, again, the Abrams problems are real. Like, it's just been a month and a half now. You can't deny them. Dittman's been hot and cold. Obviously, Zampardo. Oh, go ahead.
Rincelli problems. The Rincelli and Abrams problems.
For sure. As well, even Raetsky's been a little bit vulnerable at one. Here's the thing. If you're going to hit a nadir, this is clearly it. Like, it's only going up from here if you're NC State, you would hope, throughout the rest of this season. And, I mean, that will be the big question is can they find that gear that clearly they can hit? I mean, I called that match against North Carolina. That was a top 5 NCAA final site, quality sort of performance. But there have been a lot of non-quality performances littered in as well by this NC State team. I'm sure they would be the first to admit it. But, yeah, I mean, again, that was only one half. That's the best part about all of this ACC jockeying because, Jay, now again, that matchup on Friday between UNC and Virginia, it's probably for the regular season title as UNC, dare I say, get their first signature victory sans Reese Brantmeyer this season as, again, UNC got pushed. I know ultimately it says 4-1 win over Duke, but let's be clear. After taking the doubles point, things got dicey for the Tar Heels. There was a moment where I believe Bryzgalova had taken her match, so it was 1-1 overall. At the same time, after taking the first set, Evans had dropped her second set to Barankova. Crawley, after taking the first set, she was down a 5-2 second set deficit to Chevette Kimchi. Elizabeth Scotty was down a set and a break to Emma Jackson as well. Like, it just felt like singles was tilting in Duke's direction. And then, dare I say, for the first time this season, we saw that Tar Heel push that has been so prevalent, a part of the last decade in women's college tennis. And look, it started with Carson Tangillick, who we have maybe been as tough on as anyone out there in the college tennis intelligentsia. She just hasn't played to her standards here this season. She gets a massive 7-6 first set to ensure that the Tar Heels take 3 first sets in singles, and then she closes that match out in straight sets, 7-6, 6-3, to just steady things, make things 2-1 Tar Heels. From there, not only does Thea Rabman force a third set, not only is Evans starting to take a lead in her third set as well, but Crawley turns around her match from 7-5, 5-2 down, 5-5. She takes that one. Scotty from a set and a breakdown. She takes her set 7-5 as well. Now, ultimately, it was Evans who provided that third point, 6-3 in the third to earn the 4-1 victory. But I'm going to be I'll be transparent with you, the listeners. I texted Jay with a massive panic button saying this is a disaster for UNC. If they drop this match, I don't know if they're in the inner circle anymore moving forward. And to say I did a full 180 after watching the last 40 minutes of that match, Jay, that might be an understatement. That is just what you have been waiting for if you are a Tar Heel fan. And, of course, big picture, you're concerned. This team is beatable. But this was the first time they actually had to dig deep, Jay, to find something. And I guess they did have over Miami as well. But this is at Duke. This is a Duke team that just beat NC State. This is, again, ACC regular season title chances hanging on the line. And they go out and they play those last 40 minutes of singles. That was particularly impressive. What'd you make of this one?
Yeah, well, the difference with that Miami match is we didn't know how bad things were going to be
sure.
in the Miami match, right? And so now, with context and with the compounding results we've seen, as we said last week, this felt like a must not lose for North Carolina. And it was looking like it could be a lose for North Carolina. And 5 of their 6 players did everything they could to not lose. And I thought every single of those 5 had impressive comebacks, impressive pushes. And it's a testament to the experience that a lot of them have, but also the freshmen stepped up as well. Rabman coming back, getting her second set in a tiebreak. Tatum Evans drops her second, but she ends up clinching in the third. So I thought they all had that push that was something you were looking to see. I don't know if I was as positive on it as you were, a full 180, but it was a result that you wanted to see at Duke and impressive from them, certainly.
Just so significant for Evans to get a win like that after being on the wrong side of it against Sempardo. She pulls through. Rabman taking that second set against the Schvetz, who's been
Huge.
excellent for Duke so far this season. And, again, I do want to talk about the Duke side of things because I'm not fully drinking the Kool-Aid there either, but this team is top 16 curious, like no doubt about it. And they've got some real weapons. Like they should go 1-1. Whoever plays 2 on a given day between Kimchi and Jackson, that player should feel really good about their chances at 2. Bryzgalova, after a disastrous first year in Durham, she has been so good in her second year at the number 3 spot. And then again, Katie Cott, after not playing last year, she was right there at 4. I can't emphasize enough how long that first set between her and Tan Gillig was and how significant it was for the Tar Heels that Tan Gillig took it and gave them that third set. But, look, it's twofold. Evans has to beat Barankova. That's been one of the all due respect to Karolina Barankova, the senior. She just hasn't. That's if you're a great team, that's where you beat Duke. That number 6 spot's where you got to attack. That she forced a third is what made me think, oh, man, it's really all working today for Duke. They brought their best today. And UNC survived it. And I guess coming out of this, I feel a little bit better about the upside of Duke, but it's the first time, again, UNC took a couple of punches, and they're still standing on the mat at the end of the fight with their hands up in the air as the champions. And this team just needed that so desperately heading into conference championship month with the NCAAs now a month and a half away. So I guess that's why it's just no one needed a win like this more than UNC, as we alluded to last week, and they finally got it. And so now they can, again, they beat Virginia on Friday at home. I don't know how the tiebreakers work in ACC regular season play, but they can go win the conference title still. And in the end, isn't that all that matters? Putting up another banner at the Cone whatever tennis center?
Well, they need help because they lost to NC State, right? And
yeah, but
so
NC State now has 3 losses. So what I'm saying is if Virginia and North Carolina are both the 1-loss teams, don't you default to the head-to-head there? Because you can? That's that's my logic game. That's what I would do.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I think it feels like, at least on the outside, it feels like maybe some of the pressure has now been released a little bit. Sure. But yeah, on the Duke side, I mean, we'll be curious to see if Ellie Coleman gets back into this lineup because I think that top 3 is actually looking pretty good right now. Bryzgalova playing that well. It's unfortunate Schvetz couldn't get it done. Shades of that UCLA match last season, but yeah, they're definitely playing a lot better than they were early in the ACC season when they went on the road or not even. Were they on the road at Miami and FSU this year?
Yeah, and they lost.
I know
both.
lost both of them. Yeah.
Well, no, if Coleman's back at 6, that singles lineup's a problem. Now all of a sudden, I get very intrigued by all 6 because they could feel pretty good about their chances everywhere. Dare I say, they could UCLA someone this year, excuse me, in the second round of the NCAA tournament. But again, that's everything that happened on the ACC side of things. Let's move now to the SEC where Auburn, they just keep on Auburning. We've got a fantastic weekend for the Auburn Tigers. Well, twofold, I guess. Where do we start? On the one hand, what a fantastic Sunday for Auburn Tigers fans as they knock off
Senior
Georgia.
Day. So that's the one that matters.
Absolutely. For a senior class that has done a lot of special things. Again, a senior class has been through so many different storylines for the Auburn women who, of course, obviously their head coach assistant fired to start this dual match season. Just a reminder, I suppose, there's a lot that happens in a college tennis year, so fans may have forgotten. But what does this group go out and do, Jay? They go out and they beat Georgia 4-3. Just the purest of Auburn results, as ultimately they drop the doubles point in this match, and yet they find wins at the top 4 spots, Jay, against this Georgia team. Straight set win from Bennett over Riasco, straight set win from Arsenault over Lapata, straight set win for Okotoye over Mert. Now, let's be clear, whose name is missing from that list. It's Alexandra Vecic, who wasn't playing for this Georgia lineup, but still, 3 straight set wins as a response, and then it comes down, by the way, so they get the 3 straight set wins. Everything else goes to 3 sets, so Georgia's going to be on the road needing 3 3-set victories to pull off the win. Now, they almost get them, as Grant, Narundorn do get 3-set wins at 5 and 6, but in the end, you knew this moment was coming. Like, if you followed the story of Carolyn Ansari, her knocking off a top 5 Georgia team 6-3 in the third to clinch a 4-3 win on senior day, we should have seen that coming, Jay. Like, that's the most Carolyn Ansari factoid to end a career. Like, that's what they'll put on the banner that they have for her inevitably wherever in the Auburn tennis facility. Like, just the perfect moment for the senior who maybe is most emblematic of the fight Auburn plays with. Like, just, again, also, by the way, and I'm burying the lead here, they lost 4-3 to Tennessee on Friday. We can talk about that when we talk about the Vols in a second. But, Jay, this is just one of the moments that makes this sport beautiful.
Yeah, it's a huge victory for Auburn, a much needed one. I think had they lost this match, it just would have felt tough moving into the postseason. And this now puts them within flirting distance of the top 16. That probably breathes life into this team as they're looking for more opportunities down the postseason. And you look at these players. Yes, Ansari gets the clinch over Vidmanova in what was just a complete grind fest between two players who can absolutely outgrind the best of them. You see Arsenault step up and beat a Lopata who has been undefeated. Now, granted, that has been at number 4, but she gets the win after a heartbreaking loss to Tennessee on Friday. Impressive for her. And you have DJ Bennett, Angela Okotoyi, both stepping up. So nice for both of the seniors in Ansari and Arsenault to step up, get those wins in this match. And again, I think breathing life into this team really down the home stretch.
Even Ovunk and Flack were in third. Flack was, I believe, they were both in third sets in that Georgia match. Like what? Or excuse me,
well,
Flack
no,
and
Ovunk.
Despain.
We
Yeah,
actually
Ovunk played on
Despain.
Friday. Yeah, excuse me, but still, like, that's a ridiculous effort. Again, a remarkable victory. Now on the Georgia side of things, do you read too much into it, given the absence of Vecic? Like, where are you with that loss? Because they've played a lot of 4-3s. It feels like that's the number this year. Everything is, if college tennis had odds makers, everything would be 1.5 spreads. It's like, do you think they're going to 4-2 them, or are you on the 4-3 side? Because that's usually the score.
Yeah, I mean, this could really hurt them from a seeding perspective, and they win doubles.
For Georgia top 8 now.
Georgia won doubles, to be clear, and then now they didn't have Vekic in doubles, they didn't have her in singles, so I'm assuming it's an injury. I hope it's not serious, but yeah, I mean, in terms of where I see this team, assuming a healthy Vekic, it doesn't really change much, but it certainly hurts them from a seeding perspective.
Yeah, it just feels like, again, other than Oklahoma State, no one's avoided that head-scratching loss this year. Even Michigan, the head-scratcher to USC at home. Like, I know they were without Jaden Brown, and you can make your talking about it. Again, Stanford, not exactly a head-scratcher losing to UCLA, but inner-circle teams typically find a way to win that match at home. Michigan typically finds a way to win that match against USC at home. Obviously, Georgia, you can point to all these different things now, and just again, like, the only unimpeachable resume is Oklahoma State. That's it right now. Everyone else has some sort of blemish that you can pick apart as you look at their lineups and their various strengths and weaknesses. And I just think that what that tells me about this year is, again, the gap between the field is so narrow. Like, all these teams really are so good. And that line between good and great this year, that margin is just so thin. I think there are a lot of great teams, but the totality of very goodness following them behind, it just leads to these 4-2, 4-3 matches. And in those scenarios, again, more than anything else, just give me the team playing at home. Oh, by the way, your weekly reminder, Oklahoma State gets to play the NCAA tournament at home. I wonder if that's going to matter. For what it's worth, Georgia did bounce back and get a 4-1 win over Alabama, or I should say they started the weekend with that win on Friday. So not a complete disaster of a weekend. An Alabama win should matter on their resume moving forward. But, yeah, I mean, again, huge for Auburn to get themselves back in that top 16 hunt. In fact, they're sitting at number 16 in this week's new ITA computer ranking. So as of right now, they would get to host those first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. Jay, as I mentioned, though, they lost their Friday match to Tennessee, and that's actually where I want to turn to next. Some teams that had some really good weekends that, as we look at the NCAA tournament draw and where things ultimately end up, again, Week 12 might be a reason why these teams are where they are. Tennessee back up to number 18, Jay, in the ITA team rankings, as they get two, not great, but two really good wins over the course of the weekend. 4-3 again, they knock off that Auburn team on Friday, a match I believe clinched ultimately at that number 3 spot by Catherine Aaliyah, 6-3 in the third. Excuse me, that was the Alabama match. The
Yeah,
Auburn-Tennessee
that
match
was
clinched also at 3
7-6,
7
a
6 in the
buster.
third. Yeah, by Aaliyah over Arsenault. So good weekend for the sophomore Catherine Aaliyah. You know my thoughts on this Tennessee team, Jay. Does this change anything about the narrative for them for you?
No, I think we're both high on Tennessee, like really, really solid team to get this win over Auburn after losing doubles as well. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you're going to beat this Auburn team, it starts winning at 5-6, which they did. I think Tennessee can roll out very strong 5-6, and they weren't even with their full lineup here. And then they pushed them really hard at 3-4. And the one surprise that we saw from Auburn this weekend was they did flip DJ Bennett and Ariana Arsenault at 2-3. So Elsa Tomase, who's back up to the 2 spot, got the win over Bennett. And then Catherine Ayula gets the win 7-6 in the third. It's an impressive performance from Tennessee, and they're going to be a tough out for anyone, particularly as we get down to the postseason.
The biggest surprise for me as I look at this Tennessee team, Sophia Cabezas is at 16 in this week's ITA rankings. Like, if she's going to be that good at one, I think she's 9-4, 9-5, excuse me, overall to start the year. She didn't get the win over Ansari, but I believe she beat Alabama the next day.
She did.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like we've talked about their depth, the options they have everywhere. Feels like that's a lineup often of 6 really good 4 through 6 singles players, and yet Cabezas has been the real deal at 1. Again, Aaliyah, the real deal at 3. Like, this team's starting to find some options, some points they can turn to in each and every match. And yeah, I mean, again, you look at this team now, wins over Auburn and Georgia. They got a win over LSU, win over Florida State that I think has aged very well as the Seminoles continue to rise. They played NC State 4-3. Like, Tennessee's just frisky with everyone. This is a really good team. Again, I don't know about
Yeah.
great, but a really good team that in other years would absolutely be in the top 16 conversation, like, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Cabezas 18-8 overall this year,
Yeah.
and she was playing 5 at Iowa State
Yeah.
last year. So what a remarkable come up for her to be in the top 16, flirting with All-American if she can keep that ranking and get seeded at the NCAA's.
I don't remember so Kadlikova is still in and is still in college tennis. Obi's still in college tennis. Cabezas is still in college tennis. I think someone stayed as well. I'm forgetting who, but someone stayed at Iowa
Kiram,
State. Yeah, so
she's
Papik
at number
Kiram.
1.
Could that team, had those 4 just all stayed, is that still a top 16 team?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think so. Like, that's a really good top 5. I don't know who their 6 would be, but even Sans Boomer, like, that team would have still been right there in the mix. And
Yeah.
again, maybe not top 8, but certainly I think in the top 16 conversation with how everyone else has stepped up in their roles elsewhere.
Yeah, you'd have to assume they'd still make that same jump, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like this Cabezas become a top 20 player if she stays at Iowa State. I don't know. But it's been great to see what she's been able to do there. And we should note that no Alana Wolfberg for
Mhm.
Tennessee this weekend against Auburn. So that adds to sort of the how impressive that win was.
Yeah, and still a 2-0 weekend. What about Washington? Another West Coast team with success this past week. 4-3 win over San Diego, a match they ultimately clinched at the number 3 spot. Huge win for the 5th-year Astrid Olsen, 6-4 in the third over Mia Mack. They also get the good ranked win over Oregon 4-2, but again, that was a top 16 win over San Diego for a Washington team, as I mentioned earlier, back up to number 25 now in the live rankings. A team with a bunch of returning experience from last year when, they were right there on the edge, dare I say, of being a top 16 team all season long. 14-6 overall, Jay. Like, that's a pretty strong start for the Huskies.
First of all, I love that you call it the live rankings. I haven't heard that
Live
before.
rankings. Sorry. That's mini break talk sinking in.
No, but it's true because I think
Eh,
we're all looking at the projected for next week. So
Sure.
that's what you're referencing. Absolutely. Well, this Washington team has the benefit of being really battle tested, having played
Mhm.
indoors. You look at their losses, they're almost all to top 16 teams.
Mhm.
And this is a massive win for them over San Diego. It's by far their best win on the season. And for them to weather the storm of getting beaten pretty handily at 5-6 and pull out some 3-set victories, based on that experience, then Alexia Jacobs, who I know we were both impressed with at indoors, she gets the win there at number 2. Really, really good victory for
Their
Washington.
lowest ranked loss, or like their worst loss, is to number 15 NC State. Like you're right, they've lost 6 times to NC State, UCLA, Ohio State, USC, and a couple of other teams I'm blanking on right now, but all of them are inside the top 16 of the ITA live rankings right now, Jay. And so, yeah, like Washington's good, is what I'm saying. They've only lost to good teams. They beat who they're
Yep.
supposed to beat. Now, still looking for a first signature victory. Will they have the opportunity to pick that up remaining this year? They've got Cal at home, Stanford at home. Boy, if they can go 1-1 that weekend, like I think that would qualify as a signature victory. Picked up by the Huskies, always so difficult to play in Seattle as well. So, wanted to bring your attention to them. This is more of a fun one, Jay, and I've had the opportunity to call this team pretty closely in our coverage of the Big 12 on ESPN Plus. I'm really liking what I see from BYU this year, who, by the way, are up to number 36 in the rankings. That is the highest this BYU team has been since the late 2000s, since about 15 years. You look at this BYU women's tennis program, who not only get 4-3 wins over Baylor, TCU this past weekend, Jay, 14-4 overall on the year. There are some pieces I really like in this lineup. It starts obviously up top with Bobo Huang and what she's been able to do, but I love how Kendall Kovic scraps Emily Astle. This team's been, I think they took their first loss of the season at the number 3 doubles position against Baylor. There's something like 14-1 there at that position now. I think they're also like 10-3 or 11-3 at 2. This team takes doubles points. They get Huang at 1, and then they find 2 more. They're in the fight. It's just, again, it's a really feel-good story for a team who, by the way, have the best outdoor view at their outdoor facility in all of college tennis. Like those mountains in the background, my jaw drops every time. It's a feel-good story, Jay. This BYU team is legitimately NCAA tournament good.
Well, I think this is going to be the new Texas Tech in the Big 12
Ha,
because
interesting.
this is a tough place
It's a
to play
great comp.
because the rest of these schools are at sea level and they've got to go to BYU, high elevation. The balls are going to fly. There's a reason BYU has only lost one match at home this year, and that's Oklahoma State. That's because it's a tough place to play. None of these teams have played at BYU before. This is their first year in the Big 12. So they're not only acclimating to the elevation, but they're acclimating to completely new environment, surroundings, where you get your food, where you get your hotel, when you arrive to the courts. Like everything is new when you go to play BYU this year. So I think that is in favor of the Cougars. But yeah, they have a lot of pieces. They have a big weekend coming up to show what they have against Oklahoma and Texas on the road.
Shout out to Coach Hassler, Coach Curtis. Like, again, they're doing a really good job. It seems like, according to my list right now on our screen, because Texas Tech, the next team we want to discuss, beat Baylor and TCU as well this weekend. Let me just say, if Texas Tech and BYU are travel partners, like, oh my God, is that a difficult road trip to deal with? Or maybe it's better. They're like, you're going to get elevation twice. It's going to be a little different in both places, but enjoy. A big weekend, though, for Texas Tech, who faced, I think it was 5 team match points at the number 1 spot against TCU. Ultimately, were able to fight their way out of that 4-3, the 4-0 win over Baylor as well. Texas Tech up to 26 in the rankings. Good weekend for the Red Raiders.
Yeah, we've already seen BYU and Texas Tech face off, but Texas Tech won that match. But yeah, it was impressive win to get the back-to-back 4-3s. I mean, you're putting in the hard yards that weekend, and they've got some pieces, and they're rebuilding with the new head coach there. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they can do with that program, build them back up to a team that was kind of regularly making Sweet 16 appearances in that 2017 to 2019 range.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last but not least, how about Wisconsin, currently sitting at 30 in the ITA rankings, but the Badgers' big wins over Nebraska, Iowa, to just kind of consolidate their spot of like, no, we're the 3rd best team in the Big Ten, right behind Michigan, Ohio State. But again, it's just worth noting, you look for this Wisconsin team so far this season, the overall record. I mean, again, I don't think they have the signature victory yet, but they haven't lost many times either. I don't know. I like, my thoughts on this Wisconsin roster. So any excuse to talk about them, I thought I'd throw in.
Yeah, what's with their schedule this year, though?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a good question.
only lost twice. They lost to Texas and Georgia Tech.
Neither of which that bad of a loss.
No, neither that bad of a loss, but they haven't played many other teams.
Yeah.
Um, that's just not a schedule that's going to get you to be a top 16 seed. Where at last season they're starting to move into the top 25, top 20. That would have been the next elevation for this team to take. Uh, Something got messed up in this schedule.
Yeah, 14-2 though overall. Not the worst start. Again, controlling certainly the team controlling what they can, but yeah, I mean, look, like they still have the big ones on the schedule, right? They haven't played Michigan. They haven't played Ohio State yet. That's what this team's banking on, getting a big swing at. By the way, we haven't talked about the Buckeyes. Feels like in a month and a half. Like we haven't talked about Michigan that much either in the past month.
Well,
And well, I'm just here we go. Say
we,
it. Come on, you
I
want
was gonna
to?
say we said goodbye to them after their match in mid-March. We said we'll see you in the postseason, and
I
yeah,
guess I guess Wisconsin at 14-2. What I'm trying to say is interesting enough that we'll see them on this show after those matches because I'm curious how Wisconsin fares in each of those battles. I'm pretty sure they go to Ann Arbor this year. I don't remember if Ohio State's coming to Madison or not, and so I'll have to give that a look. But it's just worth noting, Jay.
well, I was gonna say we'll certainly hear about it because you make the outline for this show.
Oh, it's very true. And so, yeah, I can guarantee you that's on the list. But again, those were the big weekends I thought you need to know about as looking at the other results, Jay. And of course, there are always so many we could choose from. The ones I was particularly focused on, I keep talking about this Florida State team that's rising right now. Florida State all the way up to number 28. They're 12-6 overall. I think they've won something like their last 7. Another sweep this weekend over top 75 teams, Boston College, Syracuse. It's how fast they're winning their matches, Jay. Doubles point, 3 straight set singles victories in pretty much everything they're playing right now. And just that's what good teams do when you're the better team. And in a year where it feels like no one is taking care of business efficiently, it has been of note to me that I have 2 hours, literally an exact 2-hour window to fit Florida State into our ACC cross-court cast because they are on the court, they are off the court, business is done. Really impressive senior day for them that I wanted to point out. I thought Miami, pretty good bounce back weekend, obviously, after they had a tough one against Georgia Tech. They get pretty comfortable wins over Syracuse, Boston College as well. Georgia Tech, just to stick with the ACC, what did I see? 4-3 over Notre Dame, 7-0 over Louisville, solid wins. Then these are some feel-good stories, or a feel-good story in 2 matches, Jay. Penn State, they had their biggest weekend by far of the season for the Nittany Lions to get wins over Rutgers. Maryland obviously really hurts Maryland's tournament chances, but a massive victory for the Nittany Lions. I also had Illinois beating Northwestern. That was a huge win for the Illini as they try to consolidate their NCAA tournament resume. And then all I'm saying, and I know they didn't have Zainalova, I don't believe, but all I'm saying is Texas-Kansas was a really good match outdoors. And that was a really fun 4-2 win for Texas where Kansas pushed them. But that's really everything I got from the past weekend, Jay. What did you see? What did I miss? Any comments? Any final thoughts on Week 12?
No, I think you chose some great ones. I do have a few others I want to highlight. How about talk about taking care of business? Oklahoma, Kansas 7-0 for
Yeah,
Oklahoma.
that was
Against
an
Iowa
impressive
State
one.
7-0. This is a team that I think is starting to cook a little bit. They got Sherbina, they got Arusha back in that lineup, getting victories this weekend. I think they're going to be looking like a lot different team come postseason. Then the other one to circle is Florida. We haven't talked a lot about them recently. They get wins over the Mississippi schools, but no Emily De Oliveira in quite some time. And so that's something to watch. They also didn't have Sarah Dahlstrom in that match against Mississippi, against Ole Miss. That was a 4-3 match. And so Ole Miss ended up sweeping 4-6. So no De Oliveira. If they're not going to have Dahlstrom, that's going to end up being a pretty thin team. So I'm watching that over these coming weeks.
Yeah, I think those are all good things to point out as well. You're right about Oklahoma. Those are, again, I just gave you the Kansas spiel, how they pushed Texas. That's a really impressive 7-0 win. Michigan, Ohio State, they looked the part as favorites as well. Oklahoma State remaining undefeated. And then, I don't know, I'm always keeping an eye on South Carolina because they've had some injury issues of late. Again, they seem to always play 4-3 matches. They didn't this past weekend. That felt notable to me. But really, that's everything from week number 12 of this 2024 college tennis season. With another week in the books, Jay, comes another edition of our Cracked Rackets rankings. Now, we've got our new top 10 for all of you. But just a reminder, we have 6 voters of late 5 voters in our Cracked Rackets poll. How does our poll compare to the ITA rankings? Well, let's start on the ITA side of things. Number 10 for the ITA, as I alluded to, is Cal. Number 9, USC. Number 8, Texas, who obviously we have a little bit higher than that at 5. At number 7, they have Georgia. At 6, UNC. 5, Stanford. 4, Virginia. 3, Pepperdine. 2, Michigan. 1, Oklahoma State. So you see, we only disagree on one team. We have NC State in our top 10. Obviously, the ITA rankings has USC inside their top 10. Our Cracked Rackets rankings are as follows this week. At number 10, we have NC State. Number 9, Cal. Number 8, Georgia. Number 7, UNC. At number 6, we have Pepperdine. Number 5, Texas. Number 4, Stanford. Number 3, Virginia. Number 2, Michigan. And number 1, Oklahoma State. John J. Parsons, your reaction to this week's rankings?
If we just have like NC State pinned at number 10 here, it's like regardless of what they do, we just slot in NC State at 10. At some point, they're gonna need to fall out. But
it's just
other
tough
than that,
because, like, again, is Georgia's resume that significantly better than NC State's that you've seen, like, their because we've seen the NC State ceiling and how they beat UNC at the National Indoors and how they beat them at home again. And, like, again, beyond really Pepperdine probably right now at 6, the margins after that, like, throw a dart at a board who you want your California team to be between Cal, UCLA, USC. You can make an argument for any of them in those spots. Georgia, I think you can make an argument for them, and everything for Georgia you say holds firm for A&M, except for they also lost to Georgia. Like, that would be the one knock against them and some of the early season stuff. I don't know, like, the margin, I guess for me, everything after 7, it's just your degree of preference. Everything after 6, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor the NC State point every single week here, so we won't do that. But other than that, I mean, Virginia, I think this is the first time they've been up to 3 in the Cracked Rackets poll, right? So that's a CR high for them. But other than that, I think these are relatively the right teams.
Yeah. I do want to point out we had a tie at 10 this week between NC State and A&M, and our tiebreaker process just determined NC State at 10. So shout out to the tiebreaker. Yeah, I mean, again, like, I'll tell you my ballot. I had NC State at 8 this week, Georgia 9. I had UCLA up to 10. I had A&M 11. I had USC 12, Cal 13, and then Auburn 14, Ohio State 15. Like, I don't think the gap between, honestly, anything between UNC and Cal at 13, like, if you wanted to switch that order in any manner you'd like, I'd be fine with it.
Yeah, so I didn't pay anything, attention to what you said after you said NC State at 8. But
That's funny.
Look, this is why we do the rankings.
All right. But you know what? Says the man who had Stanford at 10 on the men's side. Do we want to? I was literally thinking to myself, like, I'd like to bring that up here on today's show. So thank you for the mechanism for doing so. But I know what I saw ceiling-wise, and I'm sorry, Georgia hasn't done enough for me with that core to be like, oh, yeah, that's definitively – their best is definitively better than NC State's best right now. Same thing with A&M. The problem
is NC State has shown a floor that is unlike any other team in that we're discussing.
UCLA, like, do you remember when they got blitzed by Duke and Ohio State? I know it was indoors, but, like,
you know who also lost to Duke? You know who also lost to Duke?
Here we go. And are you going to say
NC State?
There it is.
Yes.
A 4-3 thriller.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I do not want to belabor this NC State.
No, let's belabor it. I like it. It's good.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. Again, Michigan, the quietest number 2. We haven't talked about them in about half a month. Virginia deserves to be at 3. Like, they beat Pepperdine. They've beaten NC State.
I have had a theory that these ITA rankings need to incorporate, like, a degree of time decay, because, like, it's pretty ridiculous that, like, Ohio State men can win, like, 6 matches in January and February and be undisputed number 1 for the rest of the season.
But I don't think that's fair, because if you schedule that aggressively in non-conference play, shouldn't you be rewarded?
I'm not saying you can't be rewarded, but I'm saying that, like, I don't think we should be treating a January victory the same way we treat an April 15th victory, and we do today. And you clearly abide by the, like, ITA ranking principle where, like, a January victory is the same as April, because you get so biased by these early matches.
I don't
Like
know if that's true. I
that
just know what I saw in person. That's what I get
yes, okay,
biased
but you
by.
get too biased than the person stuff because that Virginia Pepperdine match played outdoors today. I have no confidence that that Virginia team gets the same win that they got over that
I
Pepperdine
don't
team.
know if I agree. Like,
That Pepperdine team is way better than what they showed up and rolled up to in Seattle. Way better.
that may be true, but Virginia's really. I need to go through the Virginia singles records again. Like I'm taking Virginia at 4-6 for at 5-6 for sure. Like I don't know which way the doubles points going because Collard and who's Collard play with that one? I'm blanking.
She
Azidato
was playing
maybe.
with she was playing with Travinsky.
That's who it was. Like that pairing is if anyone's going to put up a fight against JT and Savannah, like that pairing has the opportunity to. I think 2 and 3. I'm not going to say lean
They
Virginia,
got
but
blitzed indoors, but
yeah, I'm just look. Anyways, I think it's a good
anyways,
debate.
I think it's something
I'd
to
go
noodle
tiers.
for
I'd
you.
go Oklahoma State 1. I'd put Michigan through Pepperdine in the rankings right now as our tier 2. I put 7 through 37 as my tier 3 and say I don't know who's at home on any given day.
I don't know. Let's let the viewers decide. Let us know. NC State top 8 team or not? Gruskin has them 8. I don't have them top 10. Let us know either in the chat or on Twitter. You know where to find
A
us.
hater's gonna hate absolutely at AL Gruskin at J Tweets Tennis. Let's look, Jay, with the rankings in the rearview mirror then on the week ahead because week 13 could be really, really fun in the college tennis world, and it starts with the headline trip for the aforementioned Pepperdine Waves. They are at Stanford, at Cal, more California madness. Look, I mean, the Pepperdine at Stanford match is the headline match, so you could argue that's the more intriguing. But honestly, I really do like Pepperdine at Cal as well because I'm still not quite sure what the Cal ceiling is either. I will also say, though, you could argue Pepperdine's favored in both of these matches with how well they have played of late, how good they have looked outside here this season. Again, they haven't lost a match yet. Outdoors this year, good wins over a bunch of different California schools already. John J. Parsons, your thoughts on this Pepperdine weekend and what you expect the Waves to do?
Well, they're definitely the favorite against Cal. They've beaten them twice this season.
Fair enough.
So that would qualify as a favorite. I think this is a fascinating matchup with Pepperdine because
Oh, with Stanford?
Pepper at Stanfordine because the strengths are pretty inverted.
Mm-hmm.
Like you start to like Stanford at 5-6, and it's tough to find a pathway against any of the top 3 against Pepperdine, but doubles leans Pepperdine. So I can find 4 paths for both of these teams. So I'm very excited for that match. And yeah, Pepperdine's going to have to be ready to turn back around regardless of what happens against Stanford and show up. And it's, as you say, it's tough to beat a team 3 times. So they're going to have to do that against Cal.
The doubles is the most interesting to me in that Pepperdine Stanford matchup because
Oh.
Czar, Brodus, and, go ahead.
There's no, I will go on record here. There's no way Stanford takes this doubles point.
Well, if they don't, I don't know how they're like. Things just become tough because look, Stanford's the favorites at 5-6 for sure, but Bolkina hasn't been playing that great at 4. And again, if anyone has the top 3 chutzpah to match Stanford, it's Czar, Brodus, Chen for Pepperdine, so they can match their. They can prevent Stanford from taking 2 of the top 3 as they are so accustomed to doing, as UCLA prevented them from doing as well. If Pepperdine gets that doubles point, Stanford's in trouble. They could lose 2 matches at home this year, and what I believe is the final season, right, of this outdoor facility before they tear it down and start building a new one. And so, yeah, that's fascinating. I do think, though, the pathway for Stanford, Ma over Brodus, maybe at 2.
Yeah.
I can't take Yep over JT. She's been that good. So you get Ma 4, 5, 6?
Yeah, you have to have Joaquina step up, and she on paper should be able to beat Anna Campagna. So Ma 4-5-6 would be the path.
What about Cal? Cal on the other side. I mean,
well, that's a little tougher.
El Sola's played 4. Like, we're home at 3. They've got some strength up top too. Like, if Czar Ivanov finishes, it means the match went 4-3. Because in theory, that match should be 9 hours at the number 1 spot.
Yeah, I think Pepperdine likes their chances at doubles. I think they feel like they're in the match at 4 and 5 as well.
Yeah.
Alsala has not been as good as she's been the past few seasons. 5, I don't think is like
but
Nikki
Lon
Redlick
Me
at
versus a
5.
freshman, like Lon Me will dissect that freshman. That freshman will be reconsidering playing tennis, perhaps, at the end of that match at 6. Like, that's what Lon Me will do to you.
Yeah, I mean, so give Cal 6,
Okay,
but
sure.
I think the rest of these matches lean Pepperdine.
I just think it's really competitive in all of these singles matches for Pepperdine. Like, they could go 0-2. They've been so good outdoors. And if they go 2-0, I might have them at number 2 in next week's rankings because just with their body of work outdoors, at that point, it becomes undeniable. That's why they're number 1 in Tier 1 for me, Jay. So don't worry. I'm still sitting with the Pepperdine Waves here a little bit longer. How about the Who's? They've got a fascinating weekend at UNC, at Duke, probably senior day for both, I imagine. Or whoever gets the Sunday match, I guess, for Duke is probably senior day. For Virginia, I guess Virginia Tech on Sunday probably would be still. It's a Who's UNC rematch after Virginia handed them that defeat at the National Indoors on that Sunday. Duke's been getting better and better as this season's progressed, and it does feel like they have some spots they could attack Virginia at. I'm on the call for each of these matches, so I will not be offering a prediction. That's where I get to turn to you, John J. Parsons. What you got for me as you look at this ACC thrilling weekend?
Yeah, this is a good one. This is one of the weekends we've been looking forward to in the ACC. I think Virginia loses to North Carolina. I think North Carolina will reflect back on that match, that tough, embarrassing match at indoors, and want to right the ship, if you will, particularly if this is in fact their senior day at home. So I think they find a pathway. I think they're able to get doubles. I think they get a win from Crawley at 1. I think Scotty had been looking really good up until the little blip against Jackson, but you feel good about her there. Virginia, I think, is going to be tough though at 4, 5, and 6. But I think North Carolina gets the win here, and then I think Virginia gets the win over Duke.
All right, again, really good matches up and down the singles lineup for each of these teams. And again, that's just tier 1. You've got Miami at NC State, Wake Forest. We will find, this Miami team's good enough to go up and beat NC State if NC State has another one of those days. And the depth of this Miami team, who's got seniors everywhere. I know Noel's a 4th-year redshirt junior, but Noel, Fenning, Bakalin, Schuchnecht, like it's just seniors everywhere, plus Shinyi Nong. And so that team's got some experience, not going to be afraid of that trip. Florida, South Carolina at Vanderbilt. If Vanderbilt goes 2-0, I promise you we'll be talking about them for the first time next week. Auburn at Alabama. State of Alabama has been something we've talked about. Texas Tech at Texas. Oklahoma. Again, you'd think the Sooners, Longhorns would take care of those, but you never know. And then I'm intrigued. Washington at Arizona State. Can the Huskies rally after their big weekend last weekend over San Diego? Oregon. Jay, which of those tier 2 matches intrigues you the most?
Well, I want to see if Washington can back up that win over San Diego. This time they're on the road at the Arizonas, always a tough place to play. We really haven't seen much from Vandy this season. So if they want to step up, particularly against a Florida team that might be a little undermanned, then that's one to circle as well. So lots of good ones this week. I mean, we're getting down to the final few weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Florida State, who's got the other half of that Miami road trip. They've got at Wake Forest and at NC State. And so, again, I keep saying this Florida State team is rising. Certainly, they will have the opportunity to prove themselves to tough road environments. Obviously, a top 35 team in Wake, a top 14 or 10 team, depending on which set of rankings you want to look at, in NC State. A lot of fun tennis ahead in week number 13. Of course, we will be back here next week to cover it all. But Jay, last but not least, before we go, as we have completed the first 3 months of this 2024 college tennis season, we do have a significant sample size of college tennis to turn to. And we've offered the top 10 of the ITA team rankings. Let me just walk you through the top 10 of the singles rankings right now, Jay, because I do think they're fascinating. You look right now, Mary Stoyana, 25-3. She's at 1. Reese Brantmeyer out for the season, torn meniscus. She's at 2. Kari Miller of Michigan, 26-7 at 3. Obi Kajuru, Oklahoma State, 4. Raetsky, 5. Ackley, 6. And Sari up to 7. Savannah Brodus up to 8. Connie Ma at 9. Lisa Czar right now as at 10. Comar's at 11, given she plays 1. That feels particularly relevant. Fiona Crawley right now is at 21 in the country, but she continues to rise. I already mentioned Connie Ma, right? She is at number
Yep.
9. Yeah, excuse me, overall. Like, just starting to look at some of the pieces, some of the names you might think of in the gal conversation. Like, again, you'd figure the gal has to come from Oklahoma State probably this year, as they're the undefeated team remaining. And yet it's not Obi and Komar that have been like the driving forces of the Oklahoma State success. Yeah, they've been excellent, but Carrington and Novak don't lose in the bottom of that lineup. Miyamoto's been elite at 5 as well, and it's just like you feel like having as good of a top 3 as they do almost supplements how strong they are in the bottom of the lineup. It's not just who's the gal right now, but maybe even more broadly, Jay. Let's look at something that has U.S. Open potential implications, because we don't have a Diana Schneider this year. We don't have a 1 or 2 loss Fiona Crawley. We don't have a Peyton Stearns, who's the clear-cut number 1 player on the clear-cut number 1 team. We don't have an Emma Navarro amongst us, dare I say, or maybe we do. Does Luciana Perez did she have more street cred coming in than Emma Navarro did? Some would argue maybe. I think that's a debate we can have a different time. But Jay, there's just no clear-cut the gal. It felt like Rayetsky was primed to take it after the national indoors, and yet, again, you lose to Syracuse. You take a loss to Heba Sheikh as well. By the way, I didn't mention Heba Sheikh. She's probably elevated herself into the conversation this year as well. I don't know who the NCAA singles favorite is. Like, where are you with this conversation, Jay? What minds come to head?
Well, I think it's a little
Names come to mind.
I think it's a little disrespectful to Mary Stoyana. As you mentioned, she's 25-3. She's 11-1 this season at number 1. I think the reason for some of that glossing over is there are 2 very noticeable losses. That is to Alexa Noel in a 4-3 loss to Miami, and then the 4-3 loss to Dasha Vidmanova. So those are not matches maybe the gal would lose, but the record speaks for itself, and she has been doing a lot of winning this season. So
she's also top 5 in doubles with Mia Kupras. Feels like a piece worth adding in the gal conversation, as she's doing her end in the doubles lineup as well.
Yeah, and she got shafted last season with the injury of Carson Brandstein being out. They were playing doubles together. They were undefeated at number 1. So she is, to me, the front runner for that conversation. But again, there are some noticeable gaps there. I think losing 2 number 1 matches in a 4-3 environment is a knock against the resume. But she has the resume right now of, you mentioned like a Peyton Stearns. Mm-hmm. Peyton Stearns took a loss to Connie Ma. So she's the favorite for me. I have a few other nominations, though. So one is Reese Brantmeyer, because
that's a very good one. It was near the top of my list.
Because the impact that we are feeling in her absence has really resonated throughout the entirety and the course of this entire season. Yeah. And the trajectory of this season might be very different if she is not injured. So she comes to mind. I also think Fangren Tian at 31 right now is probably not getting the love that she deserves as the reigning NCAA singles champion. She hasn't lost outside. Yes, she lost to Kontos and someone else earlier this season, Komar, in that kickoff weekend. And then I'd put up Janice Chen right now as undefeated at number 3. She's looking like the Janice Chen we all remember. Tough to be the gal when you're playing number 3, although I think they should move her up. But that's my short list right now.
Yeah. Or Gala Mesahurito, who, again, always has been that player.
List.
Yeah, for Michigan. I think Carrington, she kind of epitomizes, dare I say, the fight, like the intensity that, no, we might be new, but we've been around the block once or twice, and we're ready to be at this level, ready to be on this stage. Like, she kind of epitomizes the belief that so quickly seemed to have been inspired amongst this cowgirl group. And so, obviously, Christina Novak you could put her at 1B in the Oklahoma State nominees for the gal, but the Stoyana case you make is very convincing. Like, you're right. She's probably the best player in college tennis, and we don't talk nearly enough about her success. And it's partially because A&M's had a little bit of an underwhelming season by our standards. We had them a clear-cut preseason top 5. They haven't sniffed top 5 of the ITA live rankings in a while. That's a great call Fang Rantian, exceptional call. You might just say Lisa Czar instead of JT for Pepperdine because she has been like, again, do you remember our December pod about Pepperdine? It was just like, well, Lisa Czar really has to come back for everything to fall into place. And to her credit, she came back and everything kind of fell into place for Pepperdine. And to wear the mantle of the number one singles player, to kind of be like, all right, we're throwing you with she's been all over the place in the doubles lineup. She was with Conway at first, and they've kind of played around there. But it's like, you're just going to be the senior, and you're going to have to work through these, and we're going to trust that you're going to be our workhorse through it all. Now, you're right, JT in the traditional sense has been more the gal in that lineup, but I could make a Czar case as well. But the Brantmeyer case is really strong because UNC went from like, and we're going to never say this again in a January podcast, but a Pantheon team where it was just like, okay, are they going to stand for 98 and drop like 4 individual points this year? And they lose her, and just everything's been a little bit different. And so that's probably the strongest argument for Brantmeyer. And by the way, when she left college tennis, she was 1 in the nation in doubles and 2 in singles. So like, in reality, it's her, Tien, Stoyana, Gala, sorry, I can't help it, and Lisa or JT. Pick whomever you'd want. And I'm not saying she's actually a nominee, but if you were to build the trophy to represent the ethos of what this award's supposed to be about, the trophy would be sculpted after Lanmi. Like, I just want to be clear. Whatever we make our season awards, like, I will find a way to squeeze her in. I promise, because that's one of our revelations of the year. But it is I wouldn't pencil Stoyana as an unequivocal favorite. NCAA is. I'd probably put her as the leader in the pack, but I don't think I would say, oh yeah. When someone asked me who's the favorite, I wouldn't say it's clearly Stoyana. I would say there's a group of favorites, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's basically how it goes, right? I mean,
Sure.
who was the favorite last season, and then who won?
Fiona.
And right,
I thought Fiona though was
Fiona.
like the pretty clear, but I thought Fiona had like enough success throughout the course of the season, plus being a 2022 NCAA singles semifinalist, where her case to be the favorite more convincing. All due respect, well, maybe it's not now that you've laid out the numbers, than the Stoyana, who also won All-Americans this year. I'm just disrespecting you, Mary. I'm sorry. I'm done doing that. Yeah, Mary should probably, her or reigning NCAA champ Fang Rantian should be the favorite.
Yeah, I just meant more, even when there is prohibitive favorites, like Emma Navarro in 2022, after she 0-1 to Peyton Stearns, she gets knocked out by Abby Rincelli in the round of 16. So, you don't always need to be a prohibitive favorite to win the title, but I would say right now, going into that, the odds would place Mary, but you still feel like in any given match, there's a lot of players that can knock off Mary Stoyana and have a real shot at winning this title.
No, again, the Kari Miller disrespect as well. She's like 3 in the country and has been number 1 for the number 2 team in the country all season long and for 5 years pretty much now consecutively. And again, I'm sure there are a lot of records she has already set or is on her pace to as it relates to the Michigan women's tennis history book. It's a very open race. That's the biggest, like, no one is the gal right now. The gal is TBD, I would say, is where I would leave this conversation, Jay.
Yeah, I would say like Mary is hovering around that title, and unless someone else really steps up, it's hers for now. That has to go to someone, and so, but it can be snatched over these next months.
Can we call her the G? And she still has to earn the AL, but she's the G right now. Like, she's probably the G, but she's not the gal quite yet.
I don't know if we're young enough to say that, Gruskin.
I'm young enough. Don't associate me with your spectrum of the polling segment. Anyways, yeah, she's the G right now, but we're still looking to crown the gal. Nevertheless, that is where things stand at the end of week number 12 of this women's college tennis season. Of course, again, we got so much coverage coming up ahead on week number 13. Big 12 coverage Thursday, Friday, Sunday on ESPN+. Of course, the ACC, SEC Friday, Sunday on ESPN+. And then don't forget our Big 10 coverage on our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel on Sunday as well. A shout out, as always, to Daniel Westhoff, who makes everything you see on your screen possible. That said, by the way, John J. Parsons, any fun things? I know we had the Okotoye interview drop on No Ad, No Problem. What else can we expect coming up this week?
Yeah, that was super fun. Hear about her win at the African Games and her path towards the Olympics. Not a guarantee right now, so has to schedule some of those pro events in there. And so I'll have a few more episodes coming, more recaps. Have to figure out what the match of the week is for this coming weekend, and maybe it'll be Stanford Pepperdine, just because I will be there in person. But yeah, more to come as always.
How can it not be Stanford Pepperdine? I mean, that's such a good match on paper and so many different implications it feels like for the inner circle moving forward. That said, yeah, looking forward to listening to that. I haven't listened to the Okotoye interview yet. I do promise to do so at some point here this weekend. Let me tell you, as I'm fighting this sneeze, well, the perks of being live, I was able to fight it off. Again, all of you listeners should really go check out No Ad, No Problem. If you haven't already, go check out the Cracked Interviews podcast as well. We've got a lot of great conversations on the horizon. With all that said, though, signing off for week number 12 for the fantastic John J. Parsons, our super producer Daniel Westoff, and all of us here at both Cracked Rackets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. Jay, what do we tell our listeners?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all tomorrow night. Thanks, everyone.